साल होने वाला जयपुर लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल इस बार 26 से 28 जनवरी के बीच होगा। लेकिन इस फेस्टिवल से पहले दिल्ली के ताज होटल में इस फेस्टिवल का एक प्रीव्यू हुआ, जहां कुतुबी ब्रदर्स ने शानदार कवाली पेश की और इसके साथ ही आज के जर्नलिज्म को लेकर एक पैनल डिस्कशन भी हुआ, जिसमें पत्रकारिता जगत के कई बड़ी हस्तियों ने शिरकत की, जिसमें सबा नकवी, सुहासिनी हैदर, जेफरी जेटलमैन और निखिल कुमार शामिल हुए। तो वहीं स्वाति चतुर्वेदी ने इस पैनल डिस्कशन को मॉडरेट किया।
Question on whether journalism is in peril, I would say yes, but it also has that challenge that it has to then go back to the first principles and go back to the idea that journalists eventually have to be the eyes, they have to be the ears, they have to be the first brain, if you like, that deals with the facts on the ground and goes back to becoming the first draft.
I agree, but we also have a Prime Minister who's never held a press conference, the first Indian Prime Minister, never ever to have held a press conference in about 4 years and 8 months now. Sabha, what do you think of that?
Thank you, Swati. So I definitely think that not holding a press conference is something which is dangerous, that he should not consider himself open to scrutiny. But if I may step in here, when we talk about journalism being in peril, fundamentally every regime in India, to different degrees, every democrat all over the world tries to manage the media. Donald Trump is doing it currently in the US, where he threw out a CNN journalist and the other media got together against it. And similarly, even in the Congress regime in India, there was an attempt to try and have certain private members' bills which would curb the power of the media. In the Bharatiya Janata Party of this time, since I've covered the BJP for so long, the regime led by Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee was extraordinarily open, more than the Congress regimes that followed it. Currently, the current Prime Minister has chosen not to have even media does not travel with him. He's just cut off from the media and he operates in a different level. And I think that is bad for democracy. But I think the greatest peril to media, we simplify it as journalists. It's not just about regimes. It's about our owners. And how much do they invest in real, authentic political reporting? They don't. I think you're from the New York Times. I just read this fabulous story on Facebook. Done by the New York Times, in which investment was made in reporting. Reporters were given time, resources to do that. Who does that here? Everything is, you're supposed to deliver stories on the very quickly. So I wouldn't make it just about, I have survived, I have a Muslim name, I have survived covering the BJP, I know them, I do all that. I don't make it also about myself. I think in social media, if you're going to survive there, you can carry on about how you're being victimized. I would also add, I have a problem with journalists writing and telling their own stories. Whatever it is, I still have a voice, I have columns, I have spaces, people listen to me. My job is to cover other people's stories.
Let's get Nikhil in now. Nikhil, what do you think? CNN, enemy of the people?
No, but some people think so. And, you know, as Sabha said, there was that episode with our correspondent in the White House being kicked out. But what was good about it was that when CNN responded, everybody else, including Fox News in the court case that CNN filed, supported CNN. I agree with everything Suhasini said, every single word. And there's just one other thing that I think is worth highlighting when we talk about the press and the free press and the perils. The press, to be strong, to be useful to people at large, society at large, and to be able to do its job, you need to have the right framework and the environment and everything, but you also need the press to be economically viable. And I bring this up because in many parts of the world that's not the case. For years and years I worked in the UK. I used to work at a British paper called The Independent. From the time I joined to the time I left, shortly after which the paper folded, there were multiple rounds of redundancies. There wasn't money around. People weren't paying for it because of new media and because it kept changing. You know, you went from the internet here, what do we do? Videos here, socials here, what do we do? That made it very hard for that paper and others in that industry, and this is true in lots of parts of the world, for them to be economically viable, and that makes it very, very hard for journalists to do their job, because that's when, in fact, they have to make compromises. So that I agree with everything you say, and that's just one thing that I would add. When we talk about the press in peril, we often forget about that. It's absolutely true. There's questions of political pressure, making sure that free speech is protected. But once you deal with all of that, you also need the thing to work. Yeah.
I think the world is in peril. I'm more positive. I think the media is more democratic than it's ever been. And I even hesitate using the word media. When I started as a journalist 20 years ago, we called ourselves the press. And somehow that got changed to the media, which sounds more sinister and amorphous than the press, which has this sort of lofty connotation of standing up for freedom. This is what I've noticed working for the New York Times, is we are hearing from the people we are writing about and our sources and our audience more than we ever have before. We are more accountable than we ever have been before. So I write a story from a little village in India or a place in Somalia that 20 years ago had never heard of the New York Times. Those people can pull up the story, check every fact, make sure their name is spelled right, and if it isn't, get in touch with me and fix it. And that used to never happen before. And I also think social media has made things more democratic, where there's so many more people that can post news, and yes, some of it is used irresponsibly, but I'm a purist when it comes to free expression, and I think everybody has a right to use the different outlets that we have, for better or for worse. I do not believe in content discrimination and saying your message is negative, your message is destructive, let's shut you down. I think that's more destructive than a free society. And so there's a cost to that. And what you were saying about how people react to rumors on WhatsApp, people always reacted to rumors. They just weren't on WhatsApp.
It's
I'm talking about policy being made.
I'm sure policy was made on some rumor somebody heard in the halls of Washington or here in Delhi. Like we're no different. That's why I have a problem with blaming WhatsApp for some of the trouble that's caused. That's just a vehicle for spreading a rumor. But rumors have been destructive for since human beings have been around.
But you wrote a story yesterday, and I said yes. And he said there's a problem with the story. So I said, what's the problem? So he said, what you've written is actually causing a lot of upset in certain circles. So I said, what does that mean? So he said, there's a trend. It's trending. So I sort of heard trendy, and I was thinking nothing I've ever written is ever trendy. It's always boring, diplomacy and all the rest of that. And he said, no, it's trending. And what he basically said is that the story I'd written showed perhaps a negative light to what the politician had said. So, politician who belonged to party A was then attacked by party B. Party B then began to trend this particular thing on Twitter. I'm just about to. Give me a minute. And then, essentially, his party came back with a counter trend. The story was about something the Prime Minister had said in Shanghai. And when he said it, when he basically said that earlier, you as NRIs used to feel ashamed of being Indians. But ever since 2014, you now feel a certain amount of pride. He said this, we wrote it. The trend went, Prime Minister shames India. So what this gentleman said to me, and Swati's book is something you have to read simply because you will find a lot of it unbelievable, but it happens every day. What this gentleman said to me was essentially that when this trend went out, we put our boys on the job to counter the trend. But then every few hours, their trend would come back. Now, he kept blabbering about this trend for a little while, after which I said, my deadline goes out in half an hour. If you want to deny the story, please let me know. Please issue a rejoinder, and we will try to cover it, or we will try to take it as we feel is fit. But I want you to know, and this is where I'll stop my story, I want you to know that I was actually there, and you weren't. So you see, that is the sort of challenge we're dealing with, that you're actually there, you're actually seeing things, you're actually reporting things that you should be the first draft on. But Twitter and social media, and I know Jeffrey's looking at me like, no, this has always been around, but it's not.
It's not.
It's not. The counter-questioning and the democracy that you refer to is also a bit of a Tower of Babel, which basically is able to counter any truth with a lot of confusion.
You know, Jeffrey, I agree with you entirely. I think one of the things which we should express is journalism is such an uncertain profession, but it's been such a joy.
Of course,
I just love being a journalist.
Me too.
I go and I just go to Bastar and I'll stay in villages. It's a part of Chhattisgarh. I love the process. So if you're going to look for something which is safe and secure, it's not a great profession to be in. About the trolling, so there was a time when I used to be very upset about the trolling. So I get trolled all the time, but then I stopped. So recently, the state of Karnataka had elections. And Bangalore is the capital of Karnataka. So I go to Bangalore to cover the elections and I walk into the BJP office in Bangalore, which is Karnataka is the state which has a lot of IT cells, a lot of the trolling and all that goes on there. When I go in there, I am mobbed by BJP workers who troll me and they want selfies with me. It was hysterical. And Rajiv Gowda is sitting there. So I'm from UP and I go to Lucknow and Bihar and all, but people there don't watch English channels, right? And they watch Hindi channels, so I don't get it. So they troll me and they take selfies of me against a cutout of Narendra Modi. It was a life experience which I will not forget. I didn't know whether to, and one after the other, BJP chaps, they kept coming, man, one selfie, you know. And you are seeing a Karnataka congressman, he knows what I'm talking about. They are watching these English channels. And so I said, okay, Sabha, you've got to lighten up on this. These guys who are doing all of them, so of course there will be some people, it's not a nice thing to happen. But it's also something which is not going to stop. You know?
Clearly it's not, but we haven't really signed up for that. So I think we're totally out of time. Last thoughts, everybody. Is journalism really in peril? Start off.
I think it is, but I think at the same time, it's always been. I think it's a very, very important question which has a very complex answer, but I think what Suhasini said is the final thought that I'd leave everyone with, which is that it still works. It works to do proper journalism. It works to go and look for facts, to present those facts, and there is an audience for it. And yes, somebody else might be reporting something which is completely made up, but that doesn't really matter to me as long as I can do my job and my colleagues can do theirs.
I think more and more we are going to be called on to go back to the basics. And I think journalists have to accept that call, because at the end of the day, I think you've all seen that cartoon where they talk about, of course, how people are electing leaders and saying we want a leader who's just an ordinary guy who represents us much more. And there's that cartoon of the man who stands up in an aeroplane and says, okay, I think this pilot is doing a terrible job. Hands up everyone who thinks I should be the pilot. And the joke is also the same for journalists. At the end of the day, we as journalists have been privileged to be given a role to be the eyes and ears for this first draft of history, and we have to keep going back to that.
So as a big battle of 2019 approaches, I think all of us are saying, keep the faith.
तो दिल्ली प्रीव्यू के बाद अब यह फेस्टिवल 26 से 28 जनवरी के बीच जयपुर में होने जा रहा है, जहां साहित्य और पत्रकारिता की बड़ी हस्तियां शिरकत करेंगी। और अधिक खबरों को जानने के लिए सब्सक्राइब करें दिल्ली 99।